It's easy to fantasize about freelancing, the freedom, the ability to spend your time working on whatever you want, but it isn't quite as clear-cut as you might think. And since quitting my full-time software development job to make videos and live stream coding full-time, I've encountered a whole undercurrent of challenge that I didn't anticipate and now need to solve for. In this video, we'll touch on staying motivated as a solo worker, consistently delivering value, and the pros and cons of working for yourself. All of this will come from the lens of somebody who codes and creates content full-time. Let's first jump into my day-to-day, some of my responsibilities, to give you a bit of a perspective of how I'm spending my time. Because I feel like when you think of like, oh, someone's a full-time content creator, you just kind of assume they like wake up at 10, work until 2, and then they're done for the day. I think that some cases can be like this depending on the level of delegation. So I'm currently, because I'm in the first little stretch here of doing this full-time and working for myself, I have been experimenting with a lot. So I currently have like full control of everything that I'm doing. So I am managing all of my brand deals. This includes emails, pitches, production, iteration, even retrospectives. It's very important to me that whenever I work with a company, that it's a really good match and that it's a very successful campaign. So I like to try and stay up to date on different ways that I can measure that success and how I can optimize based on how the audience responds to this, what is the best format, what are we doing well, what could be improved, and go from there. I always want to make sure that I'm kind of like optimizing every single time, improving every single time. So that is a big part of what I spend my time on because it's obviously a big chunk of my revenue stream. It comes from brand deals. And then of course there is AdSense from both Twitch and YouTube, alongside all of the other stuff. So the long form content is where I make the bulk of the ad revenue. And then of course, shorts for discoverability and brand deals. I also spend quite a bit of time producing videos. So I do all of the production, all of the writing, editing, thumbnails, as you might expect. My desired cadence for my channel is that I'm posting one long form video a week and multiple short forms per week. And then of course, live streams. So the live streams, I do this 3 times a week. I think I'm gonna have to cut this down to a little bit less time, just given that it is so time consuming and takes so much energy. And there's only a certain window of time during the day that I can dedicate to a live stream. Otherwise, most of my audience is off to bed. I think the majority of people, they like to have me in the background while they're working for the live streams. So typically I'll start to see a lot of drop off after like 3 p.m. Pacific time, pretty much when people are starting to go home or when the European viewers go to bed. So I can pretty much only do my live streams earlier in the day, which is a little bit of a struggle for me, given that those tends to be my most productive hours during the day. So it would be potentially the perfect time for me to be filming content or researching some different things or even like coding. The time management part has been difficult. And then of course, I'm also trying to continue growing as a developer. That is the whole point why I quit my job, is that I wanted to redirect my energy back into myself. And I genuinely love programming, but figuring out a balance of making sure that I can continue growing with the content and also grow as a developer. Both of those things take a lot of time. It's a bit of a chaotic schedule. So we're going to jump into like how I stay motivated, how I make this somewhat sustainable, and even just like general tips for freelancers. I am going to cover freelancing in a whole other video because I have come up with a lot of different ways that I think would help with freelancing in general from my experience. And I know that that is an avenue that a lot more developers are looking to get into. So I really think it'd be worth kind of sharing those tips. I'd say a big part of what keeps me motivated is having a genuine interest. And you can fabricate this too. You can convince yourself that you are interested in something. Being curious, asking yourself questions about what it is that you're focusing on, even if it's a super boring task, and thinking, can I automate this? Like I treat everything like a puzzle that can be solved. And that is what keeps me engaged. And I think that's a big part of why I like my channel. I'm always trying different formats and stuff because I find it really interesting to try and express programming and tech in a new format. So another big thing that keeps me motivated outside of just curiosity is a desire for certainty. I very much abide by a lot of the teachings of like the Stoic philosophy, which is pretty much if something is not within your control, let it be. Like, don't focus on it. You can't do anything about that. But what you can control is your energy and your effort, your attention. So I try to be very intentional with how I'm spending my effort. That is like one way where I have some level of control over the situation, is through that desire for certainty. I'm going to make sure that I am putting my best foot forward with every opportunity that I'm given so that I can't look back and have regrets. I think that in life, regret stems from not reaching your potential. I think that if you give things your full effort, that you can never look back and say, oh, I wish I had done differently. At the end of the day, you only have so much information you're going off of. You only have so much life experience that you can look back on and try and learn from. If you look back, you know that you genuinely tried your best in a given situation. You can't regret that, okay? This also means that you have to be selective about the opportunities that you do say yes to. You have a limited range that you can work with if you are putting that level of quality into your work. It's very important to me that I'm putting a lot of effort into whatever I'm doing, and I'm not going to look back and say, oh, I wish I tried a little harder, or I wish that I had spent more time doing this. It's like I'm always going to try and be refining my processes, and I'll share some of those strategies with you as well. Another thing that I do that keeps me motivated is having difficult tasks at the forefront of every single thing that I do. So it's very habitual for me to do things that I don't want to do in order to achieve some result that I do want. So for example, sometimes you need a little self-care time. I always make working out the necessary evil before I get to relax. If I'm feeling tired and I'm like, I want a little bubble bath or something, I have to go and at least do some yoga or like some stretching of some kind, at the very least, like some form of movement. In the best case, I go and I'm following my workout program, and I can go do that, and I come back, I got the endorphins, and I now get to relax. Another thing that I'll have is like rewards for small wins. So I think bribery is a great way to stay disciplined, okay? If I have a hard task that I really don't want to do, or I'm feeling a little bit stressed out, or I just, for whatever reason, I'm having a little bit more resistance towards this thing, I will bribe myself, okay? I got those Kirkland signature chocolate almonds in my home, and I put them in a little bowl, and I only get to enjoy that when I'm sitting at my desk working on a hard task that I don't feel like doing. That is another thing that I'll do, even with my little cup of tea, okay? Okay, I say little cup of tea, this thing's like bigger than my head. I love a good cup of tea. I'm a Yorkshire Gold girly through and through. I only get to enjoy that like caffeinated black tea when I sit down at my desk and I'm starting my work for the day. No other time am I allowed to have it because it's my little treat. Even the action of me making the cup of tea is like priming me for that work. And I think that this is a muscle that you kind of have to exercise. You have to get used to doing things you don't like doing. It starts to become easier to just do those things. Making a choice that is a little bit more effort, but gives you better results, and incorporating that throughout your day all the time, you get used to it and you just don't struggle so much with doing hard tasks and doing the things you really don't want to do. Another thing with the bribery aspect is that when you start doing cozy things, even like I light a candle when I start working or put on a diffuser. I'm a big fan of aromatherapy for learning. There's so much evidence out there to show the ties between scent and memory. So I personally love putting a candle or a diffuser or something when I'm working or learning a new concept. So the thing with that as well is that you'll start to associate those hard tasks with something that you look forward to. And so it actually makes it so that you want that treat more than you dislike the task. And you'll start to say, okay, I get to do my emails now because that means I get to eat some chocolate almonds. Other netizens asked on a Reddit thread how I stay motivated when working alone. And they said, hey, I've made quite a few posts on the subreddit about the struggles we face as entrepreneurs. The struggles I'm talking about are loneliness, lack of discipline, and procrastination. All of these things are normal, especially if you are a solo founder or solopreneurs trying to make it. But they can also be deadly and stop you from ever achieving your dreams. One thing I noticed a lot of people struggle with is motivation, especially while working alone. This is why I decided I'm going to share a few tips that are hopefully going to help some of you, and I'd love it if you can share your own tips in the comments. Thanks in advance. So their first tip is count small wins. They have a Kanban board in Notion with all their tasks, and inside every task, there's a to-do list. When I'm working alone, checking off these boxes feels great and keeps me going. I recommend you do the same. Their second tip was having a good or strong why. Why do you want to achieve this? Why does this have to work out? Ask yourself the why. The third is tell a friend. This can give you some level of accountability. And even if you don't have people in your life that are necessarily supportive, you can go and find other networks online. And sometimes just having people to tell your goals and plans to can hold you accountable. It's very hard to not finish something when you said that you would. Okay, their fourth one is very funny because it says go through Reddit daily. I'm going to hear them out on this, okay? Every day you can see posts on Reddit like this one saying how hard it is and how people are almost quitting. Reading that can make you feel less lonely and more motivated. This is actually a big driver for my content is I want to share like even the struggles of what's going on, because again, so much of social media can just feel like a highlight reel. You can look at what other people are doing and you're like, oh my God, how is that person building this project, also working a full-time job and doing content? It can just feel like so much, and they're not showing the fact that they are probably working way more than they should and sleeping like 5 hours a night. There's so much you don't see behind the scenes. So there's a reason why I try to share that struggle. And even if sometimes I'm like, oh my God, this is embarrassing. This is such a goofy mistake for me to get hung up on. You know what? It's part of the process. We've all been there. Okay. And that's a big part of why I try to share the struggles as well, because I know that all of us, it's a very human experience for us to have those struggles. And I want this community to be a place where people feel validated and that they are less alone. Software development can be a very isolating profession, but reading how other people are making it and the struggles they had to overcome to get where they are motivates it out of me. Just limit it to 15 minutes per day. I don't want to spend time you should be working on Reddit. So actually one of the comments on that thread that I really liked was set your floor, set your ceiling, always meet your floor every day. I really like that. And that is actually something that I do as well. Mine is a little bit different, especially during times where I've been closer to burnout or you're low energy, you're just struggling, you're just trying to make it. I would have 3 things that I would have to do that day and it's a good day. And it's 3 things. That's not very many things. Okay. But what is the bare minimum that I need to do today so that it doesn't set me back tomorrow? And it's always going to be fewer things than you think. So give yourself 3 things that you need to do in a day that make it a good day. And you've done enough once you've done those 3 things. Anything beyond that is bonus. There was another thread on Reddit where somebody asked solo development, how do you stay motivated when working alone? They said some projects are shorter than others. How do you stay motivated on long solo projects when there's no team or management pushing you forward? Or does it even matter if you take breaks sometimes and continue the project whenever it feels good to go? What motivates you? Now, one of the Redditors said, for me, an important thing is having a vision. You have a dream project, visualize how does it feel when it's polished and completed? What feelings does it evoke in you? Why does it matter to you? Then remind yourself of this feeling every day. My personality type for the MBTI is INFJ. So when it comes to emulating that version of yourself that is successful, how that feels every day, like the feeling side of things, I very much relate to. This would be very effective for me. The version of yourself that is on the other side of that has completed the project. How do you feel? At the end of the day, that is what you strive for. Same thing when you meet people, right? It's like in any given situation, you'll remember how you felt more so than the specifics of what was happening. I really like that as a way to set a goal for stuff or stay accountable for your goals. Because again, it can be very hard to set goals in software as well. It's there's so many moving targets that can just be really hard and abstract to try and set concrete goals for. And then they said another more grounded approach is to just adopt the one is better than nothing mindset. No matter if the day is good or bad, do something with your project. Even on bad days, it doesn't need to involve even opening the project. It can be noting ideas, planning, chatting with AI about inspirations, whatever. I will say I really like that as well. I tend to operate on if you are feeling low energy or less productive, you likely have a lack of input. Like you need more inspiration, and it's a really good time for you to actually focus a little bit less on output and focus a little bit more on getting inspiration, getting creative. That is going to recharge your energy, and you're going to have everything lined up so that when your energy is back to full throttle and you're ready to go, that you can immediately action on those things and be super productive with your outputs. Another user said, focus on discipline rather than motivation. Motivation will only take you so far. As somebody who grew up doing sports where I had to be very disciplined, I was a ballerina for a very long time. And discipline was a very important part of that. There'd be so many days where I'm just like, I'm so sore. My feet are like bloody and bruised. I don't want to go dance today. At the end of the day, you show up anyway. And on those days where it's harder for you to stay accountable for those things, bribery, I'm going to be honest, give yourself a little treat that day. Have a little treat fund for yourself that you set aside for the rainy days. Another user said, I finally crashed and took a break for about 2 weeks, did basically nothing, just read books and slept a lot. Now I'm getting back into it and I honestly feel very recharged. I have pretty great stamina, but the whole infinite grind set thing is overrated. Do what you do to recharge, and when your body tells you it's time to get back on the horse, listen to it. I'm going to do a whole separate video on burnout, recovering from burnout, and preventing burnout, because there's so many activities that you can do to help you recharge, but I feel like we sometimes lose sight of that, especially when we're in the thick of it. It can be really hard. We gravitate towards just like doom scrolling or consuming content, and that's not always the best place to end up, because you end up spending all this time feeling like you're maybe possibly relaxing, but not actually feeling recharged. So this user says, finish a bunch of smaller projects so you know how to finish projects, and use the fact that you've already finished projects to motivate you to finish another project. Then make each dev cycle slightly longer. I feel like the people in this sub was working on 7-year games. Release people release. I very much agree with that. If you've shown up to any of my live streams, you will know this is my philosophy with all of it. I think that with development, momentum is such a big part of it. And I actually also made the analogy with knitting recently, where when you're working on a really long project, it's easy to start to feel a little bit restless, a little bit bored, and want to move on to something else. This is where it's really important to have small wins along the way. And those small wins can be in the form of just small, easy projects that you just kind of throw together. You get something over the finish line and you're like, wait, I can do this. I can solve things. And it can just keeps the ball rolling, and it keeps you motivated moving forward. So I do think that momentum can be a really, really strong factor with motivation as well. Now that we've gone over motivation, let's talk consistency and scheduling, because this is what's going to allow you to actually have regular outputs. I think it does help to have certain days dedicated to certain tasks. That to me has been the closest I can come to a schedule that gives structure but is still adaptable. So sometimes I'll switch out the days, but most of the time, ideally, I'm sticking to the same tasks on certain days. And I'm trying out a new schedule right now because I have very much struggled with this, because of especially with freelance, right? You get sometimes you just get like an influx of opportunities, and they all come at the same time. And then it's a little bit quieter. You kind of have to deal with that as it comes. I think the best thing you can do in those cases is to make sure that you have a bit of a backlog that you can go from, and or figure out what is taking the bulk of your time and find little workarounds to make that a little bit easier, a little bit more streamlined. I will say, I think the first 6 months to a year of your freelancing, if you're doing a lot of different contracts on the go and figuring out what services you want to offer, because there is such a range. And again, I'll cover that in a different video. But with all of that, it can be really difficult to streamline things because you haven't quite decided on what fits each particular case and how you want to pursue each of the opportunities that you're given. I would say that in order to stay adaptable, I try to keep myself consistent to at least a number of days that I'm working on a specific thing. For example, like coding, I want to do at least 3 days. If I didn't do that last week, maybe it carries over and I do a little bit extra coding the following week. And just trying to balance it out so that you're making sure that you're hitting all of your priorities. I personally find that having certain days for certain tasks is probably the easiest, especially when you do have to still have some level of correspondence with other people. I've also tried it at previous companies where I had to get a lot of my work reviewed by other people. I would try to batch things. Right now, as a solo creator, I find it a lot easier to actually just like get one thing over the finish line at a time. I find if I have too many open threads, too many things that are half done, it can actually be more draining on me because I look at that and it feels monumental versus me tackling one thing at a time and getting that thing fully out the door. While it might not be the most efficient use of time in a sense where you would think that if you're already working on filming something or you're already working on coding, it would be best to just stay focused on that. Sometimes you have to actually just follow through and finish that one task or that one project before moving on to the next thing. So personally, I've found that to be the least exhausting, which is to me very ironic because I did think that batching would be the best way to do things, but it's not always the case. If you have any tips for scheduling, keeping up with a regular schedule, do let me know. One commenter on YouTube said, I learned that valuable lesson the hard way while doing my engineering thesis. Constraining the scope of personal projects is a skill by its own. If you're putting a lot of effort into something and you're holding things to a high quality, it's equally as important to limit the amount of things that you have on your plate so that you can continue to output that level of quality. Constraining the scope of your personal projects and your deliverables is also really important to make sure that you're not trying to overcommit to anything that you're doing. Let's also talk about deliverables because I know accountability is something that a lot of people struggle with. Personally, I like to assess everything quarterly. And the reason I do this is because it's enough time that you can experiment and have some level of consistency with your process where you can actually start to see results with things. You can see what's working and it's quick enough of a turnaround that you can still pivot without it requiring a huge overhaul on your current processes and systems. I find for a monthly cadence on things, it's a little bit too short to be able to see the results for most things. It doesn't quite give you the adaptability in case, something comes up or there's some other distraction that lasts for a couple weeks, like if there's some kind of event going on or something like that. It gives you a bit more buffer room to do things quarterly. And at the end of each quarter, I try to reflect on what did really well in that quarter, what was my main focus during that quarter. And now that I've come to some conclusions with that focus, what is the next thing that I'm going to work on or aim for this next quarter? What did I really struggle with? Because sometimes I'll try to challenge myself. In May, I really focused a lot more on coding, and that put a damper on my ability to make videos. One thing that's really interesting to me, if you go from programming to trying to talk to a camera or people, I personally struggle so much with that. I'm still in coding brain. So I want to talk about things at a much lower level of abstraction than you need to be able to actually communicate well with other people. So for example, it's like when you're in a problem and you're too deep in that problem, you're explaining things on a level that nobody else is really interested in necessarily. It's like you want to get super technical about a problem, but that doesn't do well on YouTube. People don't necessarily want to know the deep details because they're not in the project with you to where it makes sense. So that's one thing that I found really interesting is that I found it a bit hard to in this past month specifically to juggle that. But what I was trying to do for this past quarter was test the limits of what I can output. So I was doing probably 4 to 5 shorts a week up until May, because again, in May, I decided I wanted to try and layer on the coding part and the cards crumbled, okay? 4 or 5 times a week, I was posting shorts. I was live streaming 3 times a week for at least 2 hours and then posting videos weekly, long form video weekly. With that, as soon as I tried to add on the coding part, the long form videos fell through. I also didn't have as much time to dedicate to clipping and editing from my live streams. I'm glad that I did that this past quarter. It was really important for me to figure out, okay, here are all the things that I need to do or that I think I need to do. Out of that, what is actually driving results? And out of that, if I add on this additional thing that's also very high priority to me, which is the coding, what's the first thing to fall through the cracks? Because that is most likely what I'm going to need the most support with. So that is typically how I try to do things. I almost try to set myself up for quarterly goals. My Q1 goals that was my first quarter working for myself. That first quarter was mostly about actually doing brand deals and establishing some relationships with brand, doing a lot of outreach, research, doing everything on that front so that I could kind of set the tone for the rest of the year. I think it's really important to assess things quarterly because again, it gives you enough time. If you forget to do whatever it is that's working towards your goal for a week or two, you can still have time to pick it back up and complete it by the end of the quarter. And it gives you enough time to either set a habit or fail to set a habit. And you get to figure out why that happened and come to a solution for that. One really important piece with deliverables is knowing when to stop or when to draw the line at what your deliverable capacity is. We are the worst person to say what our threshold for stress is. It's like that saying of like the frog in boiling water. When we're used to a certain level of stress and we just keep adding more things to our plates, which I think we are very guilty of in the tech space. From what I see online, a lot of us are constantly trying to outdo ourselves, and we end up kind of potentially drowning in that a little bit. I think it's more than likely that you're either going to underwork or overwork yourself, especially in the beginning when you first change to working for yourself. I think the most important thing to set these boundaries with yourself is to figure out a goal, how to get there, how much you can manage, and then start to build processes around that. Each of those are going to take some time to build up. And eventually those processes are going to be things that you can do every day that will consistently give you the results that you're looking for. And as I said, you're always going to have to reflect, make sure that you're refining those processes over time. Things change so quickly nowadays. Another thing with deliverables with freelancing is that it can feel like there's no room for failure. So with freelancing, to me, it feels like the stakes are a little bit higher, especially in the beginning, because it's like the first time that you're working with a company. You want to put your best foot forward. You want to work with them again. Also making sure that it is continuing to be a mutually beneficial arrangement. I am very particular with like the companies that I work with and with those relationships, because I'm so kind of obsessed with making sure that I am performing to the best of my capacity for each of these. And so I can only handle a certain limited number of partnerships, because it's also really important for me to be looking at the analytics and to be making sure that I know what is converting, so that if we work together again, I can make sure to pitch them a campaign that works best for their product and their target audience. Now let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons of working alone. We've made it this far in the video. Thank you very much. If you have made it this far, please don't forget to give it a like and to subscribe if you want to support my channel. Let's jump into the cons first, because the pros I think can be a little bit obvious. So the cons, I would say it can be a lot harder to ideate. If you do any form of creative work, which is, honestly, development and content, I think are both creative fields. You're trying to come up with a new feature. You're trying to come up with like what is going to be relevant to your target demographic. Coming up with different ideas can be really hard. I think you need people to kind of bounce ideas off of. I know a lot of people have replaced that with AI. And I think that does help a lot, frankly. It is still not the same and not quite as effective, in my opinion, as when you're working with a team and or working with other people in your field. I will say also tasks can feel a lot more monumental and they can pile up. You are the one responsible for solving everything. You can have some days where it's very overwhelming. And you have to, honestly, I feel like, be even more careful with burnout, because it's easy to bite off more than you can chew. Also, when you're working alone, you have to create the structure and deadlines and hold yourself accountable for that, which I know a lot of people can really struggle with. This is where it can be really helpful to find different groups online or other people that are in your same profession that you can connect with and share your goals for the week and all of that stuff, because it's very hard to stay accountable when you don't have anybody to talk to about stuff. I would say another big point is, and a lot of remote workers will feel this already, but the lack of social exposure is so real for freelancers and remote workers. It can be very hard to connect and socialize. Like for me, I think I probably only have in-person social thing maybe like once a week. And I know that's going to be crazy for some people that are going into the office every day and having some kind of interaction like that. But that's kind of just all I can manage with my current work schedule. And outside of that, I do try to organize like playing video games with friends or like catching up on phone calls. We can, of course, talk about the pros of working alone, which is that it's a lot easier to focus. Personally, okay, this is my personal experience, because when I worked in an office, the amount of times I'd get like poked on the shoulder being like, hey, are you free? And I'm like, I was actually just deep in a problem that's going to take me like 5 minutes to recover from this, at least. But yeah, I personally find it's easier to focus. I love having full creative control. Again, this comes at the cost of the fact that you are responsible for all these outcomes. You have to fulfill the full cycle of that. You get full creative control, and you need to make sure that the decisions that you're making are good decisions. You get a very flexible schedule, which to me is huge. I really, really value that freedom. I know that my best productivity cycle is going to be me working at specific times in the day where I have the highest energy levels, and that doesn't always coincide with when companies want everyone to be available online. So to me, the freedom part is really big, and it's not something that I would want to sacrifice. And I really enjoy that as a freelancer, I'm very timely with my responses, especially on the higher priority stuff. However, it is really nice being able to just answer emails at my discretion whenever I want. It's nice, okay? I do really like that. I will also say the workload can vary a lot. I know some people that way underwork. As soon as they get that freedom, they're like, oh, perfect, I'm gonna do the bare minimum. And then that starts to catch up with them a few months down the line where they're no longer getting the opportunities that they need in order to sustain themselves. And on the flip side, there's also people who will overwork as a way to kind of stay in control of the situation and or to give themselves some level of consistency with their work. Not that I understand that super deeply. Me definitely falling into the latter category, okay? I'm gonna be honest, sometimes my work-life balance, or what balance? Okay, it's all work. Sometimes it's not great. But that is how I feel about my career, my identity after leaving my job, and what I've learned through that process. Let me know what you think. I'm gonna do a whole separate video dedicated to tips for freelancing. Just let me know in the comments and give this video a like if you want that video from me so that I know that that is content you'd actually be interested in. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to support my channel. Bye for now. I'll see you in a future video.